Imagine if you were a shape. What shape would you be? A square? A triangle? A rhombus, maybe? Well, gamers, let me introduce you to 1884 novella Flatland by Edwin Abbott, a novella which was a social commentary on the societal inequality in Victorian Britain. Our main character is A squared, literally being a parody of the author's name, Abbott. He was a school teacher and one of the first Smith's Prizemen ever. You're probably asking, what is Flatland's plot, LJ? I'm glad you asked. Flatland spends a lot of time explaining how things work, and that's what bored me the most, even if it is necessary. If you didn't know what a peace cry was, the book would feel more bland and dull. This goes for a lot of things in the book. When I read that the shapes feel each other and have slang for requesting to feel each other, the idea seemed like obscure world building, yet it feels like a semi-necessary piece of information to know when you get into deeper chapters. So when does the story start? In my opinion, page 44, How I Got a Vision of Lineland. This section is where the book is structured more like a story and less like a bunch of clever geometric world building. In this section, A squared goes to Lineland where he meets the king of Lineland. Women are points and men are lines, unlike in Flatland's dimension where men are polygonal figures and women are lines. One thing I didn't like about the book is how the author basically wrote Girls Go to Jupiter to get more stupider, but in a Victorian way. I'll talk about this more later. The king explains to A squared that every geometric person in Lineland has two voices. Since they can't move off the line, they aren't allowed to feel each other like they do in Flatland and Spaceland. Imagine if you had to hug someone every time you met for the first time. A squared tries to explain how the dimension of width works, and the monarch doesn't get it. In the audiobook I listened to, the Lineland King sounded like Papyrus Undertale. The Lineland King also is my favorite character. Now let's talk about Spaceland. A squared tries to explain squaring numbers to his hexagonal grandson, and his grandson brings up the concept of cubing numbers. A squared thinks about this concept into the wee hours of the night, and eventually gets freaked out when someone comes into his house. It's a sphere from Spaceland. After arguing for a bit on how the axis of height, the sphere brings A squared to Spaceland. Imagine if a four-dimensional being brought you to the four-dimensional realm. A squared looks all over his world and finally understands what the sphere means, even theorizes about more dimensions, such as the 4D and the 5D. The sphere tells him to calm down and sends him back to Flatland. A squared then goes to sleep and affirms upward, not northward, and he has a vision of the sphere, who takes him to Pointland, and they meet the monarch of Pointland, who I assume to be the only geometric being in Pointland. The point explains how even though he is just a point, he is everywhere, at once. He is everything. A squared eventually comes out of his vision, and the council guards are outside his house patrolling and chanting about visions from other worlds are strictly prohibited. Eventually, A squared is arrested and refuses to explain his travels to other dimensions, and he is losing hope of traveling to those dimensions again. The ending made me so sad, so let's talk about meanings and theories instead. The first thing I want to talk about is the way the King of Pointland talks presently. It presents the idea that the monarch of Pointland is some sort of god or some sort of omnipotent presence, since we know that geometric beings can only go to dimensions below their own and not above unless pulled by a geometric being that is in a dimension above them. The idea that this is the creator of their universe is a singular point, while circles claim to be better than everyone else, is quite ironic to me. Maybe that's not what Abbott intended, yet you'll have to pry this theory from my cold dead hands. The next thing I want to talk about is something I talked about earlier. The way women are treated in Flatland is horrendous. In Flatland, women are not actually straight lines, but instead very thin rectangles, and I legitimately thought the author hated women, but I started to question this notion when I read the line, "This omnipotence, as you call it, is not a common word in Spaceland. Does it make you more just, more merciful, less selfish, more loving?" A squared says that these are the qualities of women, and the sphere says that some of the smartest geometric beings in Spaceland are women. Flatland also reminds me of Plato's allegory of the cave, the idea that if people lived in a cave their whole life, seeing shadows of the outside world, and then someone in the cave goes outside and tries to explain it to everyone in the cave, and they don't believe them, right? It's like a philosophy thing. We see this multiple times throughout the book. The only geometric beings free from this seem to be the sphere and the King of Pointland. I rate this book a solid 9.5 out of 10. If you like this video, my Patreon, Twitch, and Tumblr are in the description. Follow them or don't. I'm not your boss. I hope you have a good day or night.